Welcome to American Common Sense, a fun look at the state of American politics, inspired by Thomas Paine's Common Sense from 1776, hosted by James Humphreys. Hello and welcome back to another episode. Today, we're going to talk about lawyers. A terrible joke, we'll start right off the bat. Does anyone know a good lawyer? I've heard that only a dead one was a good one. What about you? Sorry, I'm looking off camera at a producer who's helping me out here. He gave me a song. I can't for the life of me remember what it was. Guns, lawyers, and...
Lawyers, guns, and money.
Lawyers, guns, and money. That's right. We're going to talk about lawyers today. Specifically, government lawyers. Okay. I'm going to go back to my George Washington quote, and I'm going to use the same one I've used a couple of times on power. The Constitution of the United States and the laws made under it must mark the line of my official conduct. That's really important considering what we're going to talk about today. Today I want to talk about attorneys, government attorneys, and what this administration has done since it took office. One of the first things they did was the Department of Justice began to purge, fire, or reassign anyone who worked on a case that targeted President Trump, either investigation or in attempting to bring charges against the president, the current president, between his first and second terms. That left an interesting set of spots. And then we start to see where we're at. I had someone say to me the other day, the president didn't have all the right people around him. They were constantly undermining him in his first term, and he's got the right kind of people around him this term. And that might be true, and he'll have more people that want to support what it is he wants to do. But the quality of the advice that is given matters. And we're going to talk about that here real quick. So one of the first things is, back at the very beginning of his term, just a couple of months ago, one of the first acts that was done was the Deputy Attorney General went to the head of the Manhattan District Court and was looking at what we needed to do on a corruption case that was brought against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. So the head of the U.S. Attorney's Office of the Manhattan District Court, or the Manhattan District, is one of the most prestigious jobs in the United States as far as attorneys go. The head of that department, the acting head, I should say, of the Manhattan office, was a really strong supporter of President Trump, who he appointed himself literally the day after he was sworn in. He gave an order to drop the corruption case against Eric Adams that office had been working on and building for several years. She quit rather than follow through with that order and dismiss the case against Eric Adams. In fact, over the course of 3 days, 6 different attorneys between the New York office and the DC headquarters of the Department of Justice quit rather than follow that order. And the Deputy Attorney General himself was required to file the paperwork to try and get the case dismissed against Eric Adams. And he wanted to have the case dismissed without prejudice, so that, I think I got that term right. I'm sure someone in the comments will correct me if I got it wrong. But he wanted to dismiss it without prejudice, saying that if they wanted to, they could bring the charges again later on. It was obvious to everyone, based on the conversations that had been had, public records. You can look anything of this up on, just Google it or whatever search engine you use and you can find it. But they basically said, we'll drop the corruption charges against you if you ensure, as a Democrat mayor of the largest city, that you work with us on rounding up all of those illegal immigrants and getting them out of your city. So if you do that, we drop the charges, everything's fine. If you don't do that, even though you said you would, we're going to bring the charges back. Now, I'm going to say this is a terrible thing to say, but the definition of extortion is the practice of obtaining benefit, money or goods, through coercion. In most jurisdictions, it likely constitutes a criminal offense. Clearly, they were extorting the mayor of New York to get what they wanted politically. Second, we had another incident that came up just a couple of weeks after that, because an executive order that was signed on the very first day the president took office to deny birthright citizenship. And in order to deny birthright citizenship, they wanted to say unless one of the people who is a parent was a legal resident of the U.S. or a citizen, that no child born to two illegal immigrants on U.S. soil would be considered a citizen. The challenge to that, of course, is the 14th Amendment of the United States. I have to grab that real quick. It says right at the very beginning of it, it says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the states wherein they reside. To suggest that a child born of two illegal immigrants in the United States on American soil is not subject to the laws of the United States, it's hard to find the words of just how moronic and stupid that is. Now, I realize a lot of countries do exactly what President Trump would like to do, but our government doesn't do that. And we have every precedent, literally every precedent since the Civil War, when the 14th Amendment was ratified, to today, that says we have to grant citizenship. In fact, if a poor pregnant woman goes into labor on a cruise ship that's flagged by the U.S. or on a plane that's flying that's flagged by the United States, and their two parents are foreigners, and the baby's born on board, that's still U.S. soil. That child is still a U.S. citizen, because at that moment in time, those parents and that child are subject to the jurisdiction of the laws of the United States. It was so obvious that the judge who heard this was a Ronald Reagan appointee, said, "Were there no lawyers in the room when the president signed this order?" Questioning the competence of, obviously, the advice he was being given by the attorneys that he had to work with. And then we have what we've dealt with over the last couple of weeks, which is something that I've never seen. I don't know if it's ever happened before in history. I did not get enough research done on that, but I will say this. The president started signing a series of executive orders, at least 5 that we know of, saying that law firms that oppose him, basically, he picks them out, can't have access to federal buildings and can't have federal contracts and all sorts of other things, chilling the effect of anyone who might oppose the U.S. government. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle they're on, because if President Trump can do this, clearly when a Democrat is elected to the presidency at some point in time in the future, they would have the power to do the same thing to all conservative attorneys and law firms throughout the country. So he's deliberately punishing people through an executive order by limiting their access to material. Everything about that is 100% unconstitutional. And I'll give it to you real quick. Handy dandy pocket constitution once again. Denying attorneys access to federal courthouses or any federal buildings, or having any access to federal contracts to be able to compete or bid, would violate the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of the speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition their government for a redress of grievances. Of violating freedom of speech, violating freedom of assembly. And in Amendment number 6, it says, at the very end of that amendment, it says, "In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall have the right to a speedy and public trial, and have the right to assistance of counsel for his defense." So violating the right of someone who is charged, the ability of them to pick whatever counsel they wish, whatever attorney they wish to represent them, because some of those attorneys would be denied access to federal buildings. In fact, denying any citizen access to a federal courthouse, especially an attorney in a federal courthouse where there are proceedings happening, could very easily bankrupt a law firm. And 5 of the largest law firms in the country have been targeted, and 2 of them have gone in and had those executive orders rescinded because they offered to spend one law firm $40 million and another law firm $100 million in funds to whichever projects the president deemed they needed assistance with on certain areas. I go back to that definition of extortion again. Extortion is the practice of obtaining benefit, money or goods, through coercion, In most jurisdictions, it is likely to constitute a criminal offense. The U.S. Supreme Court in 2024, held that the president doing his official duties cannot be held criminally liable for anything. So extorting these law firms to basically get $140 million of free legal services for projects that fits them is extortion, and it's extortion that cannot be held accountable or liable. Where are the attorneys that are supposed to be advising the President of the United States? Are they there or are they not there? And are they giving the President incredibly bad advice and hurting his ability to do his job as the President of the United States? I have to ask these questions because everyone knows that every president wants to stretch the authority. The perfect example of that, which is a historical one that no one really pays attention to, is the Louisiana Purchase. Thomas Jefferson railed against the abuses of power that John Adams used as President of the United States, especially with his Alien and Sedition Acts, which includes one of the acts that was used for illegal aliens today, the Alien Expulsion Act. Alien Enemies Act. Sorry, forgot that. But the consequence of that was he railed against that and railed against that. And then he won the presidency, and he railed against everyone trying to stop him from doing what he wanted. And the biggest thing that he did while he was president was complete the Louisiana Purchase, which most people consider likely unconstitutional, but it doubled the size of the United States and set us on the manifest destiny that was declared by James Monroe later on, from sea to shining sea, from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. There was a lot of complaints about that. And this president is doing the same thing that every president before him has done in trying to exercise the most amount of power possible. But he's exercising it in a way that is extremely detrimental to the health and safety of our republic, that violates this very document over and over again. Where are his advisors? Or are his advisors so incompetent that they're giving him terrible advice? I don't know which it is, but this president is being done a disservice, and that disservice can and will hurt not only our standing in the world, but hurt his presidency with the American people. We deserve to live by the rule of law. We have to remember we are a constitutional republic, meaning that we have indirect control of the government by the people. Our representatives are meant to hold them accountable and make that work. And to add insult to injury, the legislative branch of this government, the head of the U.S. House of Representatives, is entertaining a notion by one of his colleagues to try and introduce a bill and strip certain federal judges of certain powers to try and prevent them from interfering and defending this document against what is clearly bad advice to the President of the United States. Instead of doing their job and saying, no, this is our job, this is the judiciary's job, this is your job, they're actively trying to undermine the judiciary branch of government in this particular instance. There could be nothing more damaging to the United States and the republic that we are. Remember, the reason we have a constitution is to protect the rights of the minority from majority rule. Mob rule is democracy. We are not a democracy. People like to use that term interchangeably with the republic these days. I'm well aware of that, but that is not the case. We are a republic. We must act as a republic, and we must preserve the republic. And we preserve the republic by defending the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. We must defend this document in order to protect the rights of everyone in the United States, because at some point in time, virtually everyone in this country is in some form of a minority opinion, a minority race, a minority gender. Who knows where you might be in that spectrum at some point in your lives? But we will all be there, and we need this document to ensure that our rights are preserved and protected. The President of the United States has made several attempts with executive orders to stretch executive power. The legislative branch is sitting on its hands and not doing its job, and in this case is actively undermining another branch of government in order to try and help the president accomplish his goals. He's being given terrible advice by terrible attorneys. My guess is a significant number of those attorneys, this is common sense after all, will likely face bar exams and potentially could lose their licenses and be barred from practicing law, given the kind of arguments they're taking to courts that they know are blatantly unconstitutional. And they take the same oath as the rest of us do that are in public service to defend the Constitution of the United States. I know this has been a little bit long. I know it's a little preachy, But this is critically important. We must hold those in power accountable no matter the party they're in to protect this document and each of our rights as individuals. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next one.